from the Library of Congress and the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture.
Could I start with you and your name?
Darrell.
If you could say your full given name, if you would, please.
Darrell Robertson.
Robert Hicks.
Carol Cummings Boris.
Robert L. Hicks.
Charles R. Hicks.
Valera P. Hicks.
Barbara Hicks Collins, the oldest daughter of Robert and Valeria Hicks.
I am Joe Meunier of the Southern Oral History Program at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. We're in Bogalusa, Louisiana, with the Hicks family on Friday, the 27th, 2011, to do an oral history interview for the Civil Rights History Project, which is an undertaking of the Library of Congress in partnership and collaboration with the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American and History. We all want to say thank you very much for welcoming us, and we're very pleased to be here, so thank you all. I know it's an effort to get here, and we appreciate it. As we've said, we'll just have a conversation about all of this fascinating and complex history. Mrs. Hicks, could I ask you just to start, if you like, with a word or two about your recollections of life with your husband and children in Bogalusa, maybe late 50s, early 60s, just before things really start to heat up?
Well, seemed like things has always been bad with us. Someone asked, why did my husband do all the things that he did? And it's because someone had to do it. And our thing is, why did we wait so long to start? But my husband was a very smart man, and he planned before he would do something. He'd sit down and make a plan. Not like his wife, I'll just jump up and do. But Bob, as I call him Bob, was always a planner, a very, very smart man, and a very good provider, husband and father, and someone I love very much.
Anyone else perhaps like to share a sort of family-focused thought about your dad?
Yeah. You know, I thought of my dad as just a wonderful man. And I think for me the important thing was, to a degree, knowing him before the Civil Rights Movement and then knowing him after I learned many things that he did. But for me, one of the interesting things about my dad was that he was a black man who had time for his family. And in a situation in this country where so often many blacks grow up without a father, we grew up in a family where we had a dad, a father who was there all the time, and we were in a family where things happened and we did it as a family. Sometimes I think about how lucky we were, because in many situations, if you're black and you're a black male, you're lucky if you have a father. But in many situations, when there is a father in the house, black daughters have a daddy and a father. And what I mean by that is that a father is somebody who makes you behave and disciplines you and do all that. And he does that for all his children. But then usually a father takes time and he's a daddy to the girls. And you will hear women say all the time, my daddy. And black boys don't usually get a daddy. But a daddy is somebody who takes you fishing. When you're growing up, he would come home and he'd put us on his back and he'd buck and we play horsey and just do all these wonderful things. And it didn't just happen when we were children. You know, he was a daddy throughout my entire life in terms of being there. You know, he was a daddy that when I was 23 years old and had gone to the DC to the Democratic Convention in Chicago, and the riots were going on, and my parents were worried about me. And when they picked me up, I was full of tear gas, and the first thing my daddy did was hug me and kiss me. And so for me, I was lucky enough not only to have a father, but I had a daddy as a black man. And so that just shows you kind of exceptional man he was. And I think that part of that was that not only was he that for me, but for so many people in our community, he was that. So many boys and girls in the community. And I know my brothers and sisters have other comments also, so I'm going to cut right there.
Anybody else like to?
Rob?
I don't have too much comments.
Anybody want to maybe suggest some thoughts about your recollections of Bogalusa, just as young people coming up, just before the protest and movement momentum really began to gather? The nature of being a young person here in Bogalusa.
I can remember of an incident when we wanted to go to the movie, and we always had to go upstairs. We could never sit down. I said, I want to sit down here. So I did talk to Bob about it and Jack. And we talked about it, and that was, before we started the movement. And then he said, one day you will be able to sit in the way you want to sit. And, that kind of stuck in my mind. So during the movement, then, I remember that.
Derek?
Well, I guess the memories of the younger days was the hands-on things he taught me, because I was always interested in changing the oil, and he building on this, and he's fixing this, and didn't have the resources to pay somebody to do it, so it was always like, okay, we can take this challenge on. Let's tear it apart. We had the Volkswagens back in the days that you had to. The old Beetles just were Beetles, and they would get you down the street and stop. So you had to take your knife out and reset the points, or take a plug out and clean it. And that's where I learned how to do a lot of mechanicking and a lot of, like Greg, a lot of carpenter work. Because the old house, basically, we, all of us kind of pitched in and we built it. When he got off at 2 o'clock, he'd eat or whatever, and we get in the truck and we come down here and we put up 5 or 6 sheets of paneling and do molding and the dark, and then he say, okay, let's go. And then just all the things that he taught me, I still pass on to my son, try to teach him to that it's a lot of things that, just simple things that it looks complicated, that if you really step back from it and look at it, it's really simple.
Good.
Come on.
Well, I guess I realize this is all about Pop, because of the things that he accomplished, things that he did in his lifetime. But when I remember and go back to the early days, it has always been, as Charles said, I like the way Charles started off with some of the things he said, because it's always been about family, about mom and dad. They've always been here, and I got very fond memory. Me and Darryl was two of the youngest. So when I think about the beginning, I think about the fun and the happiness we had. We had a happy family. Probably didn't realize some of the issues and some of the complexity of that was going on in Bogalusa and outside of Bogalusa at the time, because mom and dad did such a great job of keeping us happy here. But when I think about it, now that I'm older and I have a time to reflect back and think about it, I think of Dad in stages. That's when I was young and growing up. And the things that we did, as Charles said and Darryl said, he taught us things. He taught us value. And then civil rights movement, I could think about the things that he did during those times. But the most amazing thing about this family is not what I experienced growing up as a young kid or a young child or a young adult. But as I became an older man, And I listened to people talk about the things that mom and dad had done that we never even heard of before. Things that he did, things that the ways he helped people, some of the strong beliefs he had in people. It was amazing because I hadn't heard those things before, and it's still not completely shocking because you have to know the man. He was always a good man, and some of the things that people reveal, say at his funeral and time after that, they come up and talk about, made you realize that you wasn't wrong in your conception of it. He was a very good man because of the things that people testify that he done. And that's the way I remember Pop. I got Pop. I remember Pop in stages, and my belief and really strong belief in the way he was came really after his death, and things were revealed to me.
Let's pause for just a sec because somebody's at the door. Okay, we're back on after a short break and a little reconfiguration, which will be a little more comfortable with you. I think that's great. I think some folks had thoughts that they were.
Did Barbara want
Bob,
to say something?
I'm the emotional one of the group. And my father only passed a year and a month or so, and so it's kind of emotional thing for me. But I think we had a special kind of communication.
Out of your family members, how would you categorize yourself?
We communicated with our eyes. We communicated from our hearts. I knew exactly what my daddy was all about, and he knew what I was all about. At least that's what I thought until he passed. And then I realized when he passed that he was a giant, and I lived with a giant and I didn't know it. And everything that I thought a man should be or to stand for, that was my dad. All the time, in everything that he did. So just a little hard. Now he wasn't as emotional as I am. You know, I got a lot of things from him, but I didn't get that from him. But very strong. He was really, truly my daddy and a man.
Rob, you want to say something there?
Well, I learned a lot of things from my father. One of the main things is he always said, I always have a plan. Always, and he told me, and he had a lot of honest values. He say, don't do that to that person if you don't expect them to do it to you. Say always. He taught me about a lot of values, how to be honest and trustworthy and all that, most important. So, you know, those are some of the things that I picked up on and that I live with.
I have one more thing I would like to say also. That I like the way he expressed himself to the family, and then after I had children, then my children learned to respect him, and they say, oh, I have a problem. Oh, let's call Uncle Bob and see what he would say. And he passed the values that he gave to us on to our children. And he just always made, when people walked in the house, if it's the first time you came in here, you always felt welcome. And I think that just spread it all through it. So when, you know, someone come in my house, I always say, you have to make them feel welcome. And you can never do too much for your guests that's in your home. And I just thinking for so many, when I think about the values, so many values and things he taught us, and he shared all this with our children, which was great.
You were talking about black life. And for me, what I can remember about black life in Bogalusa as a child, and actually I guess almost up until I graduated, was that we lived in two separate worlds. And maybe part of it was we didn't know how bad off things were because we were children, and we had what we had. We had our schools, we had our proms, we had our football games, we had all our things. We had movies. I mean, they were segregated, but the movies that the whites saw, we saw too. They were downstairs and we were upstairs. We went shopping. We had places we shop. And some of the things that I sometimes try to remember back to is like, I don't know when we could try on shoes in Bogalusa. But I remember at one point, I think that we cut out, Barbara and I was talking about this, they took a piece of paper and cut it around, and we got shoes. But then at some point, I remember that I could just go to the store and put on a pair of shoes. I don't know when that transition happened. But, you know, black life in Bogalusa, when I think about working situations, and I can reflect on a working situation for my parents and other black people, there were different kinds of jobs. And there was domestic work, there was factory work, and there was just young people, work where people mowed yards and did those kinds of things. And so for us, black life in Bogalusa as a child didn't seem bad. And we knew that there was a distant relationship between blacks and whites. And we were one of the families that had a car. Sometimes if we were in a car and white kids would go, we go back, you know? I mean, this was those kinds of things. I mean, this was part of, you know, and if they came into our neighborhood straight through front, they were in for a whipping. And if we knew there were certain areas that were for whites, that if we got over there, that we could be in trouble. So in terms of looking at black life, I think we had a why. We learned to swim. You know, we didn't have to swim in the creek. We had activities. We had a school system. Now, with the school system, for an example, we oftentimes got the books from the white school. We got secondhand books. And sometimes, because white kids know that their books were going, when they got old, they were going to go to the black school, they carve in nigger or something. You see that in a book, in a textbook. Sometimes we didn't have, everybody didn't get a book in class. We had to share books. But we had good teachers, and we had teachers who took exceptional pride in making sure that we learned. And when things didn't go well, or you had a problem, and that was a time when, in black life, when every teacher had to visit, basically, each child's parent to tell him what he was doing in school, what he went, and it had to happen more than one time. Now, for us, black life was that we were poor, but one of the things that my mother used to do was that my mother could bake, and so she would make cookies for all of us in our classes. And if you were in a Hicks kid class, you were guaranteed to get cookies 3 times a year. Around Christmas, for Easter, and some other time. And her oatmeal cookies were just, and even today, my mother makes oatmeal cookies and send it to her grandchildren and her great-grandchildren. There's a funny story about the oatmeal cookies right now that some people, one of my brothers was to give to my other brother, and somehow his family got him and my other brother didn't get him. Right, Greg and Darryl? And so we became, to a degree, black life for us had some special privileges, though we were poor, and we didn't always understand what poor was or what poor meant, because there were families all around us. Some families had more kids than we did, and some families had more than that family. But we all ate out of each other's kitchen. We all ate beans. We all ate rice, those kind of things. So while black life was certainly segregated for us as children, well, we thought we had it going on. And then to a degree, we those of us who went off to college or we joined service, and life up until maybe I got into 11th grade, things seemed to be pretty good.
Let me say, it was when we were growing up, it was understood that if you saw a sign that said white and color, it was understood that you didn't go and drink from the water fountain that had white. It was just certain things were just understood. Now, if you look really deep in that to know how all of that built up, that we understood that, that's the same way you can look deep into my dad and to know that whatever the problem was, we had that feeling as strong as we had it about race and injustice. We had that feeling that Daddy was going to take care of it. And that's the only way I can explain it like that. Sometimes in high school or 11th grade, 10 or whatever, I was queen of the school. I was at an all-black school. I was queen of the school, and I think all the queens of the school get an invitation from Rex down in New Orleans for the Mardi Gras ball. And I got that invitation, and I was, I just knew that I would be going to the Rex. We had, I didn't know anything. I didn't know. I just said, because you're queen, like everybody else, you get to go to Rex. Talked with one of the teachers from New Orleans, and she said, no, I don't think so. So we waited for Daddy to come home, and we showed it to him. The look in his eyes. He knew it was a mistake, and he knew what was going to happen to me if I tried to go, a black queen tried to go to Rex during that time. And I remember that. So a lot of people say, go, you have the invitation, just go to it. And I think it was more trying to think about protecting me, what would happen. And I was finally advised to make a call and let them know that I was black. And I called to tell them how many people will be coming. And by the way, I'm black. And it didn't take long that they called and said that was a mistake. I changed that look in my father's eye when 35, 40 years later, I got an invitation from Rex to come to the Rex ball, and it gave me so much pleasure to be able to present that to my dad, to show him that everything that he had done, and so many other people in Bogalusa for me, that it took that long. And once again, I'm emotional, so I'm trying to hold up here. But it took that long for it to happen. And that meant a lot to me, and that meant a lot to see the expression on my father's face. And I went to that ball. I think it was one other black person there. That was my husband. And but we went. And I just want to share that.
Sometimes when you listen to people talk, and even your family, they say things and it makes you remember something. When Charles was giving his perspective about the difference between black and white back in the 50s, early 60s, it made me think about something that me and my mom did just the other day. When we was growing up, I guess we were protected so well from a lot of things. We had a happy, at least I know I had a happy childhood. And one of the things that happened the other day, me and Mom was riding in the car. When we was younger, we went to the neighborhoods on this side of town, on our side of town, and we would go what we call cross town to Papa Quarter, because that's where my grandmother had stayed. But I never went to areas like Pleasant Hill. I never even really knew they exist. And I bring this up because the other day, maybe last week, me and Mom was riding in the car, and I told Mom, we was over in Pleasant Hill. I said, I'd never been on the street before. But that was a whole different era to us. I never knew anything that era even existed in Bogalusa until I became a man. Even during the Civil Rights Movement, I still was unaware of Pleasant Hill, other than the fact that my grandmother or maybe somebody worked for people over there.
Mammy used to work on Pleasant Hill. Yeah.
Who did?
Our great aunt, who lived to be 106, who was just the sweetest person you could ever imagine. But you know, when you were talking about that, I was thinking about Bogalusa and Poplar Quarters. And when we grew up, there was another section of Bogalusa. We lived on the south side here. And then there was the north side, which they called Poplar Quarters. And basically, those two black communities were separate until high school. That we didn't have anything to do with people on the north side, the black kids over there. They had their own elementary school. They had their own junior high school. I don't know if there ever was a high school in Poplar Quarters.
No.
Okay, and so yeah. So at that point you merged. So all the children, we didn't know anybody pretty much, and that was almost like you just didn't go to Poplar Quarters. You know, one, and also I think, and they probably thought the same thing, but we thought we lived on the better side of town because we were on the south side, and I'm sure that those who grew up in Poplar Quarters thought they lived on the better side of town. And that, so there was, even in Black life, there was two separate communities. Now, of course, on both of those sides, there were different neighborhoods in there. But that's just an interesting piece that I was thinking about, that Black life, and we had the movie theaters and all that sort of stuff, and they would have to come over. And even if you went to the movies, you know, blacks from the south set in sections, and I guess I don't really remember, but I'm sure that the kids from Poplar Quarters sat together, and there weren't any physical fights as such. There might be confrontation every once in a while, but that was just part of Black life. That Black life was separate to a degree in terms of our growing up. Now, when we got to high school, we started to come together and be one.
Ms. Hicks, I wonder how you thought your way through with your husband the whole question of taking that big step forward come 64, 65, and really becoming, playing the roles, taking up the roles that you and your husband took up in that time.
Well, after we got involved in the movement, thanks to Barbara and some of her friends, they emptied the schools because two little black girls went and sat at the Woolworth counter when they signed that bill, and they thought that they could go and sit there and eat. They put them out, they wouldn't serve them, and that night the Klansmen formed. And when the whole Columbia Road, I don't know if you've seen it, was just covered with big, white, brawly men. And it was just something. And then after a couple of days, they decided they was going to come down, you know. They Bogalusa supposedly decided to get CORE in here. And CORE came in. My husband, Gail Jenkins, Fletcher Anderson, I think it was about 7 or 8 men, and Gail went down and they talked to CORE, and they got CORE to come in. When CORE came in, they started telling us about how things would be. how people would try to hurt us if we sit at those counters. We had to test those accommodations, and they would tell you don't order coffee or anything hot. They showed the children how they would knock them down. They showed the children how to get in a ball, hold their head, and just let them hit their backs. They did a beautiful job of preparing us. And after all this happened, they did Barbara and some of her classmates decided they wanted to march. And we as adults, knew the danger, so we kind of stepped back. They went to the school. They pulled every child out of the high school. They went to the junior high, elementary. They pulled all those children out. And when we looked around, they had a march of their own coming down Columbia Road. And even Bob and AZ couldn't stop them. They was just tired of being pushed around and not having the opportunities other people had. So that's how we really got involved in the movement. After the day of testing,
let me say this. What we students and the passing of the Civil Rights Act, what those two black girls understood, and what we could not understand, is that it was the law. It was the law. So if it was the law, why did we have to wait for like Daddy and AZ and the leaders to tell us, oh, we're gonna, manipulate this with this day and that day, and then we'll have people coming with the training? It was like, no, it's the law. We're not gonna listen. Let's go. And so we went, and we tried to bring everybody with us. But we soon understood that it was the law, but there were certain things that you have to do. You have to plan, and we just thought we could do, which really we should have been able to. There shouldn't have been any planning or whatever. We should have been able to go and get whatever we want because it was the law. And that's what we kept telling Dad and AZ. It's the law. We can go when we want to. They already passed it. And that's how we thought.
I've read in the published accounts about that Woolworth sit-in that those two girls just sort of went and did it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Is that how you
Did we
all
found the
knew
names
that
of those
story?
girls?
Yeah.
Yeah, but they would never release Mama.
Oh, okay.
They would never release the clans. That's why that's why you had so many clans on Columbia Road, because they were organizing, because they were trying to go out and find out exactly who those girls were. And of course, no, they weren't going to intimidate. That was going to be over. Probably the parents also, and we were able to get them out of town, and that was the end of that. And so it was over.
I'm sorry. Could you call out their names now? Do you think would be appropriate? Or
No.
No.
okay.
Sometimes they say about the South that you remember and you don't forgive. And so I think if they knew who those girls were, even now, their families and their lives, there would be some reaction. Racism has not died in the South or in America. It's still alive and well.
Barbara, you're making me think, obviously, that one thing that distinguished Bogalusa in its extreme character, it was not uncommon in many, many, many places, but its extreme character was the nature of the local police and their close relationship with the Klan and hostility to any kind of racial social change. So I'm wondering if you happen to remember anything that would kind of paint a picture of the police authorities in town back in those days and what you were up against?
You know, after we did that one day of testing, we went through all the legal things, the mayor and all that stuff, and they were supposed to give us protection, and they didn't. The children it was just something. But anyway, it was over. And we all met at the Labor Union Hall, and policeman came in, okay, it's over. Y'all can go home. The co-workers, we had two white co-workers, Bill Yates and
Steve
Miller. Steve Miller was my baby. They came, Bob took them home with us, and Bob and Bill Yates was gonna have a drink, and eat and have a drink and relax. Policemen came down to the house, want us to put them out. Put them out. They'll escort them out of town. And that mother instinct came out in me. Steve was young. I said, this is some mother's child.
How would you have handled that situation?
And they're gonna do them just like they did those kids in Philadelphia. They're not gonna put them. I said, Bob, don't let them take them. He told them, said, this is my home, and these are my guests, and they're not leaving until they get ready. They are my guests, and I'm not putting them out because of you. But you see, that mother instinct in me got Bob in trouble. He had to stand up. And then after that, Bob said, we've gone too far to turn around. He started filing suits. I'm sure Dick Sober told you all the different suits he filed. And then everybody wants to know, why did Bob do it? Bob had 5 children. And why did he take that upon himself? But we had good lawyers, and they backed us up. And Bob filed a suit, and he didn't lose his job. But he had to stand up, and he had to take a lot of abuse. Men had to carry him to work to keep the Klansmen from doing anything. You know, they say you kill the head, you got the group. They took him to work, they picked him up, they brought him back. Everywhere he go, he had to have someone with him. To protect him. So really, I was the one with this mother instinct that really got him in trouble, because if he could have very well let them take them, and I don't know what they would have done to him. We've talked to Bill Yates recently after Bob passed, and Bill said that Bob saved his life. Saved his life.
I think that one of the good examples of police protection in Bogalusa was, you can look at films and look at, and whenever we march, they allow the hecklers to throw things at us, to spit on us. I mean, not only was there a verbal attack, but there was a physical attack, and it was not one time. It was a continuous attack on the marchers, both black and white. As a matter of fact, if there were white marchers in the march, they became more vulnerable. They were after them more than they were after the blacks. But the example of police protection was that they did nothing. You know, they just stood there and watched us be assaulted or be attacked. It got so bad until the Bogalusa Voters League filed suit and went into court. And there was a court order. They had to order the police. And the judge threatened to have them locked up if they did not protect us. So that's the extreme in terms of how the Bogalusa police were at that time. In many cities, in many places, when you were being attacked, you saw the police doing that, keeping the crowd back. But you saw the police in Bogalusa step by so they could make their way through. I think that's example, and can be documented by simply looking at some of the films on the many marches, and there were many marches on a regular basis in Bogalusa, and that pattern did not change. And so we had the Bogalusa Bowlers League had to go into court to get an injunction to force the Bogalusa Police Department to do what they were supposed to do under the Constitution of the United States.
And one of the things, what my mom was referring to on the day of the testing, and when the chief of police came to the house and tried to get the civil rights workers out, when he came to the house and asked that we, that, you know, mom and dad, you know, put the people out. And when Bill Yates asked Miss Hicks, can I stay in your house? Jackie, so, can I stay in your house? And she said, yes, you're a guest. And Daddy said, these are guests in my house, and I would not put a guest out. Well, of course, the chief of police was very upset that Daddy spoke with him and wouldn't do that what he was asking him to do. But Daddy asked, will you protect my family? And the chief of police said he had 27,000 people in Bogalusa, and that he didn't have time
That he liked. And he didn't have time to play nursemaid or babysit people that he didn't like, and that it was a mob that was coming down, and that they were going to take Bill and Steve and Bill, and the family. So when that happened, Mama was trying to get the children out. Steve Miller went to call his mom. It's like I see everything happening all over again. He went to call his mom to tell his mom what was getting ready to happen to him. Mama talked to her and said that they were gonna let him stay in the house and do everything to protect him. Bill Yates got on the phone and started calling New Orleans, the headquarters, FBI, whoever he could think of. I had a list that we normally keep on the wall. I took the list and I went next door to my great aunt's house, and we started making calls that they were going to come and burn our house down and kill us, and come with your gun and come and help. So they started coming, and also they started calling other people to come. So after we had called everybody on that list, we came back over to the house. By that time, Mama called a friend and asked her to come and pick us up, the children up, to get us out of the house. Now, she would stay there with Daddy. She wasn't going to leave Daddy, but she wanted us to get out of the house. So they came through the back, and the husband and the wife. The husband went in, brought some guns, and Mama got clothes for us, and we got in the car. But we had to get on the floor of the car. Because the police was still coming around, and she didn't want anybody to know where we were going. So they slipped us out with us laying on the back of the floor, and said, no, you couldn't, we couldn't call, because the way that the telephone systems were, they would find out where we were. So we rolled all the way down on the floor till we got there, and we never knew what happened at that time. What happened to Mom and Daddy, we just didn't know. We couldn't call. That's the way it was. That's how the police were. Well, you know, the police, part of the police force were Klansmen. And one young man had gotten arrested because they would just arrest you, beat you up and arrest you for anything. And while he was in jail, the Klansman came in, and he was so afraid. And when he looked down, he saw the police uniform from under the Klansman robe. And as I said, we had to test every facility. We test the park. I'd lived in Bogalusa all my life. I hadn't ever been in that Cassidy Park over there. And while we were over there, the policeman allowed the whites to come in and jump us. And one old man had a gun. They took his gun from him, and they took his billy clubs and put him between his leg and juggled him up. The man was, he had to be, 68, 70, old man. And the policeman had that dog, and they allowed their dog to bite Gregory. We couldn't get any medical help here in Bogalusa. We had to carry him all the way to New Orleans. We carried him to a VA hospital in New Orleans. That's how we got help. And we had the Jenkins grandmother that I'm sure y'all will talk to. She was very, very fair. And they started beating her because they thought she was white. And Bob went over and filed them off of her. And she lost the keys to her car. And he pushed her car out of the park. But they allowed those people to come down and jump us. And that's one time when they allowed that dog to bite Gregory on his leg. Bob stood up and told that man, "You have let that dog bite my boy." He said, "I am going to kill you because you let him attack my boy." That policeman got his little gun and his thing. He left that part. Bob was furious because, you know, to allow a dog, and Greg was very small in stature, very small, and he allowed that big police dog to bite that child on the leg. It was just horrible. We slept in our clothes. We didn't take our clothes off at night. It was because the Klansmen were all around until the men at Bogalusa decide to do something about it. And that's where your deacons come in.
We need to pause just 1 second.
I'm so sorry, but
Should we move on?
okay. Well, yeah, please.
Yes.
Please, John's brought us back on. We'll stop.
No, just tell it.
Bernadine Wire, where y'all was supposed to go with the Hammond.
Today, yeah.
Her father was a very old man, and but he was wise. When those girls sat at that counter, he said, "Then we're gonna have trouble here in Bogalusa." That list Barbara talked about, they made out a list, and people, like different people, had that list taped on their refrigerator. Whenever a problem started, somebody was supposed to start going down that list. And this was from the wisdom of Bertrand White. He knew we was going to have trouble, and he knew what we was going to have to do to get help. He knew the policemen weren't going to protect us. But when they saw that all those men were coming in down to our house with those guns, then they knew that they were about to have trouble. So what the policemen did, they stopped them. Anybody coming down that way, they stopped them. They wouldn't let them come down that way. But living in Bogalusa, the men knew back ways, and they came through the back and came through other people's yard and got to our house that way. We had people on top of the roof. We had people in the trees, and we had our own protection. And those men stood up. They protected us. Just protected us.
And you were saying that this was the first time a group of black men responded this way? Or?
You know, I guess you don't know too much about black men. Usually black men will let white people just do them any kind of way, and they'll just scratch their head and say yes, sir.
In the past.
But these men decided enough was enough. We were just tired of being pushed around. And we decided to fight. And my husband really believed in the law. He would go into the big courts, not the people here. He filed a suit, Hicks versus Claxton Police, Bogalusa Police Department. He filed that suit. And his word was, we'll go across the lake, because that's where our lawyers were. And those lawyers fought, and they filed suits, and we stayed at the court so much down there. Every time you look up, we were headed to those courts down there. And the judge even questioned Gregory, because once they integrated the school, there was fights over there. Those children having problems?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't have any problem. Okay, we're back.
See, the children weren't like us. We always hesitate and step back. But those children had backup. They had their parents. And when we got to court at one time, Judge Hebe questioned Gregory. And he asked Gregory how old he was, what was his name, and all this. And asked him where he'd go to school. He went to school at Bogalusa High School. And how many blacks was there, Gregory? Wasn't that many.
First year I think it was 2 or 3, and then I went to second year, 4.
Okay.
And then the second year, I think it was me and Teresa that went that second year. So it wasn't that very many, maybe 6 or 7 total. And maybe a year after that, my senior year, I think that's when Corinda now, those guys came.
When did Peter come?
She came Corinda.
Well, anyway, he questioned Gregory. He said, and Greg told him his name and where he went to school. And he said, so you're the leader of the group over there, huh, Gregory? And Greg said, I beg your pardon? He said, you're the leader of the group over there, huh? He said, oh, no, sir, I'm a student at Bogalusa High. and Judge Hebe didn't know what to say about it. He said, no, sir, I'm a student at Bogalusa High. But the children had to fight, and at one time they wanted to make the black children stay up under the step. And some of the stuff we didn't even know about. We were thinking the children going to school, and they got the children in the office and up under the steps, and we didn't even know about all this stuff until Gregory came home one day and he mentioned that they wanted them to stay under the steps. And he said, I wouldn't stay on the steps. I hadn't done anything wrong. He said, Mom, if I go under the steps, if I stay on the steps now, I'll be on the steps for the rest of my life. We're not staying under the steps. And it was just good that the children were smart enough to know their rights, to do something about it. They were really smarter than we were, because we had taken this stuff all our lives and just waited until our back really got pushed up against the wall before we started doing anything about it. But let somebody else talk.
Greg, maybe you want to talk about the Casty Park episode, or maybe...
But the only thing I really remember about Castle Park. I probably was trying to hold on to Pop. I was young, and wherever he go, I was following, and probably was unaware of the dogs and so forth. Not that I had any intentions of doing anything. I just probably felt safe being with Dad wherever he went, and I never saw the dog. I never saw him coming. But it was just one of those things. I was just with Dad.
Have you ever been chased by a dog and almost got bitten? Do you know how you felt? But just imagine how a small child that a police dog bit him on the leg. So you can imagine the fear that was in that child.
You know, the Cassidy Park. What was Cassidy Park? Cassidy Park was the public park for Bogalusa. And it was a segregated park, and blacks were not allowed to attend. But in the lawsuit, one of the suits that Daddy filed allowed people to go to Cassidy Park. And one of the things that they had to do, because the police was under an order to protect wherever we were going to go. And so Daddy made a call and said, look, the children are going to go over to Cassidy Park and play, since it was now legal to do that, at a court injunction and all that. So the police then made a call to a group to the Klan or whoever, and apparently, and there were not a lot of adults with those children. Maybe it was 18, 20 children. They were on the slides and that sort of stuff. So the police made a call and explained what was going to happen. So by the time they got there, 10 or 15 minutes after they got there, these Klanmen, or the white men, came down and started attacking the children. And then the police came in. And so the police then started to, in rounding up the blacks, they put the dogs around the blacks. They were not attacking the whites while the whites were attacking the blacks. And so in that process, Greg got bit. And then, of course, as you've heard the rest of the story. But that's what Cassidy Park was. And Cassidy Park was a park that we had never been allowed to go to. And was named after the rich family, the Cassidy, which my grandmother worked for. Who the park was named for, my grandmother had worked for the Cassidy.
Any folks who haven't.
Dad, tell about your in the march. Tell something about you in the march. How your dad didn't want you to.
Yeah. Well, when the march started out from Bogalusa, well, of course, I was young. They didn't want me to go.
In which march? Because there were so many.
This is a march from Baton Rouge, from Bogalusa to Baton Rouge.
Okay, 66.
66. So one
67,
morning,
excuse me.
they were getting the food together. So I snuck in the car, jumped in the car, because they had prepared sandwiches to meet them for lunch. So I got in the back of the car, and I'm just riding along, and I'm like, I'm going to get in this march. Yeah, they're not going to leave me behind this time. So we got almost to Covington, around Waldheim or somewhere up in that area. And that's where they were going to break for lunch, under this big, oak tree. So I get out the car, helping them bring the food and everything. So I go up to Paul and say, I want to march. No, you can't march, it's too bad. But it really wasn't bad at that point, because we were just getting ready to come into Covington, and Covington was like the ally to us. They were ready for us to come through there, I think. So I talked them into it, they let me march. So that night when we got into Covington, they did the covered wagon thing with the cars, and everybody got in the middle and slept on, but they brought the kids back. They brought the kids back home, and let them sleep at home, and then in the morning we get back up and go bring the food and meet the march. So we marched from Covington. I think we did from Covington to Hammond in a day. And when we got to Hammond, it was really bad that night in Hammond, because they were waiting for us. and we got it. They didn't want us to use the school. Gibson was the principal at the time, the black principal there at the time, but the whites didn't want them to us to use the school to stay overnight because they knew up the road, Satsuma, and on up the road where it was going to be more. Denham Springs and all these areas where it was going to be more trouble. So we got there at night, and people were riding, circling, and they said, okay, we got to get all these kids out of here again. So they sneaked us out again. So the next morning, everybody gets up thinking they're going back, and they say, no. So me and another young lady, Riri, we always want to be on the front. And they had these state police that were on horses. And, they would kind of let that horse lag back. So it was AZ, Paul, and then it was me, then Riri. We were on the front. And Granny kept kidding, come on, no, y'all come to the back. It's not safe on the front. That's anything happen, that's where it's going to all happen, on the front. Because they were, targeting AZ and Paul. So we didn't pay that no mind. We just walking, holding hand to hand, singing. And I guess we started walking too fast. So we got up close to that horse, and AZ came and grabbed me and said, come back here, boy. You get too close to that horse is going to kick you and knock you out. And he said, that cop not going to feel anything. He's going to keep on going. So we slowed up a little bit, and before you know it, we backed up there again, and then bringing us back. So we were anxious, and we were just young. We really didn't know the dangers of what was going on and how dangerous it was. And then until they pulled us after they left out. We walked a little bit out of Hammer, but when they started getting a little into Satsuma, Holden, Robert, and all that, that's where I never forget that they had a church, a red brick church. And when I go that back way on 190, they would not let the state police take their horses over to that church and get water. They tried to stop that because we had kind of slowed up there, and they told the police was riding over there to go turn the faucet on and let the horse drink the water, and they waved them off, so get off the property. And that's when they took us out then, because they knew it was getting ready to get back pretty bad.
They attacked the newsman over there in Castle Park, took the cameras from them, beat them up, throw the cameras over in that It was rough.
Can I ask, I'm interested in the range of emotion and feeling and no doubt fear at times, lots of that, pride, lots of that, to watch family members, parents, grandparents, take these roles, do these things in conditions like that. I'm just wondering how the emotional complexity of that experience.
Well, very emotional. So many times they would call on this group of men that had formed because somebody was in trouble and they needed the group of men to go to their houses to protect them. Sometimes it was even in Mississippi or other places. And just to see those men go out like that, you never knew if they were coming back. They were putting their lives on the line to protect other people. So that was always a fear.
That was the kind of fear that we experienced just went on day after day after day. Even when Dad and AZ were negotiating with Governor McKethan, and he sent his airplane to pick him up. You never knew because you had seen so many other things happen, or you heard about so many things happening. So you never really knew what was going on. You never knew when someone called and said they were in trouble to come and help them. I know one of the times the deacon was going out of town because some of the civil rights workers were trapped in an area, hiding in a barn area, and they had to go out of town to get them.
And they were white.
Yeah, they were white. And they didn't know if it was a trap. So they had to go through all of this to decide when to go, when not to go, and it looked like they always went. They always went to try to help somebody. But in the meantime, you know, we would stay on the little radio. We had a base at that time.
Tell us why we had the base.
In the breakfast room, because when the telephone situation, the way the telephone situation was, when you try to call, they would cut the operators would cut the phones off.
Can you say why that was? Because
oh sure. When Daddy reported an activity that we were involved in, or we said something on the phone, then it was spread to the clans, the whites who were against us. And when we tried to call for help, they didn't want that to be also, because you have to understand, the operators at that time were related to, they were not, of course we had no black operators, so they were all related. And they would notify of the plan that we had. And I think one time we did a setup for what Daddy said they were going to do was the deacons or so were talking, and that they were going to do a setup, and they called someone to report that they were going to do this, and this, and whatever the event was. And then, of course, all the whites came, and you know, it didn't happen. So that's when we realized what was going on, and that's when they got the radios. Plus, you needed the radios so the deacons could communicate back and forth with what was going on. But it's not. What was hard, the hardest, is that some people were planted. They had informers that would come to our meetings, and we couldn't figure out how every time we got ready to do something, then the clans would always be there. And so you know, I was young too, you know, but I didn't know the details that was going on there. But I know in a meeting, they stopped the meeting and they surrounded the people. These were elderly black people, and they had taken all the notes and had written everything down. And so Daddy and the deacons dealt with that. You know, I don't know what they did to the people, but they dealt with that. So we get to a point where we have informers, many, from the governor's office coming down like they were FBIs or whatever, just informers, just feeding information back to the governor's office. So it never stopped. And we had a part where they put a hit out on my dad. And Mama, you have to talk about that.
Well, they were paying some black. They were supposed to kill him, but it just so happened we found out about it. And as I said, he never went anywhere alone. He always had someone to protect him. And at one time,
if I can interrupt for 1 second, do you remember when in the sequence of events
No.
that happened?
I'm not too.
Rob, you know
too.
when they put that, you remember what time it was when they had that man?
No, I don't know. I remember. But in the neighborhood, it was so much harassment that they have a movement of everything. Them guys would be riding in black neighborhoods, disturbing them, doing things. So that's why they had the organization, and they would go out and check out the situation. Because if they have a march, that'll make them ride and do things to people, burn crosses or whatever. So they really patrol the neighborhoods from this side of town to the north side of town. And then they had different men that had to have somebody come pick them up from work at certain time because there was a threat to their lives.
At one time, one of the Klansmen pulled a gun on AZ, put a gun to AZ's head. They was having trouble at one of the schools that was being integrated, and Bob and AZ was over there. And one of the men stepped out and put a gun to AZ's head and said they were going to kill him. And Bob ran to the back of the car, got a gun, and put to his head, said, "You might kill AZ, but I'm going to kill you." At that time, the policeman grabbed Bob and took Bob to jail. It did nothing to the man that threatened AZ's life. And they wanted to charge him with attempted murder and all that. And then I just told the policeman, "You're arresting him. He don't have a scar on him, and he better not have a scar on him when we get him back." We went over to the jail. We could not find Bob. We couldn't find him anywhere. They had put him in solitary to keep anybody from getting to. And then I also told him I'm fixing to go call Judge Heavies and tell him that y'all arrested him. He hadn't done anything, and they protected him. At that time, his mom, who was very old, and the camera was following her. She got out of the car and she walked very low in stature. And they said, "Lady, where are you going?" She said, "That's my son they arrested, and I'm going to see that my son is all right." And she marched in that jail, and they let her see him. He said, "Mom, I'm okay. You just go on back home. I'm okay." But see, once again, that's that mother's love. She marched right through all those Klansmen and went in there to check on her son.
She was born in 1900.
I guess one of the things about fear, and I guess there was 2 or 3 types of fear that existed in our community. And of course, one fear was that something was going to happen to you physically. I think another kind of fear was just psychological. And I think to a degree, in stages, that was more challenging and emotionally draining than the physical fear. Certainly in a march, I was fearful when I marched it, and I didn't march as much as my brothers and sisters because I was in school at Southern, and that's another piece that we'll talk about. But there's always a fear that they're gonna run out and hit you, and nobody likes pain. And even when I was a little boy and had to get, as children, when you got a whipping, you didn't want it because it hurt, and so pain hurts. But I think the psychological fear of having to go emotionally through this every day, and particularly for us as a family, to begin with, was just an enormous piece of stress that we never knew when my dad went to work if he was going to come back. And there was a point that they drove him to work every day to the box factory, but he had to walk maybe 20 feet They could only take him so far. Then he had to get out of the car and walk to the mill. Now, when he got inside the mill, he was well protected because there were black men there, and they were going to protect him. So the psychological fear of wondering, and we knew they wanted to kill him. They had built a coffin at one point and put it on Columbia Road, saying that they were going to kill him. And here lies Robert Hicks. And so the psychological fear of never knowing if this is the day Dad is not going to come home. Or this is the day when he goes in but he won't come out. Whether or not he get in. And to have to carry that mental stress and anguish as a family for years is an enormous kind of emotional stress. And I think that stress did not only exist it existed with us because we were a family, and as a family, we had always been a family. And sometimes maybe we can talk a little bit about what family life was like before the movement and after the movement. But also the fear that when Mr. Y or Ricky, anybody went someplace that was involved in the movement, you didn't know if they were going to make it. Or when they got arrested, you didn't know what was going to happen to them. The fear that when they took those young black girls in the jail, whether or not they were going to molest them, whether or not they were going to rape them. I mean, all those kinds of psychological fears. And for those people who were marching and things, you never knew what was going to happen. And I think emotionally, that was a piece of the movement that has played an enormous toll on so many people in the movement, not only in Bogalusa, but throughout the country. And it's a piece that really has never been explored, talked about, the psychological effects of the movement on individuals in it. So I think that was a piece of fear. There was fear of policemen. There was a fear of the Klan and the whites attacking you. But there was also the psychological fear of what you went through every day, just living in the movement.
Let me use that to turn conversation.
We're on.
Use that as a moment to switch back over to the question of the Deacons, because one response that could help and did help folks have a different feeling about what might be possible was to know that there was a system that could provide some measure of protection and defense. And in Bogalusa, that was the Deacons, obviously, and we've talked a lot about the roles that they play, but not so much about the Deacons themselves and the organization and how you saw that group come together and how you measure its significance.
Well, I think because of the Deacons, many lives were saved, even though they never killed anyone. But they were there. They had guns, and when you go against a gun, it could be you or it could be me. So this, by the grace of God, they never had to kill anybody. They never had to. Well, the only person that got shot was, we were on a march, and a white nurse was in the car, and one of the Klansmen was going in the car to pull her out, cursing and was pulling her out, and a black guy shot him. And that's the only time that anyone was shot. But those men stood up whenever was any trouble. They were there. And I'm sure Fletcher told you, Martin Luther King was this nonviolent man that didn't believe in guns. And when we went to that Meredith March, when King got ready to march, he looked around and said, "Where are the Deacons?" I'm sure Fletcher told you. And it was just that protection, and those, you had some strong black men that they had just taken so much that they were ready to put their lives up for protection.
Yeah, that's what you just said. You know, when I heard those stories, that was one of a couple of the most amazing stories I ever heard. When Fletcher told about how King wouldn't move without the Deacons. And another story that he told that you guys probably also heard was that when Meredith integrated Ole Miss, they had problems until the Deacons came.
Yeah.
And did not have a problem from that very moment that they arrived. I never heard that story till I heard Fletcher tell it after my dad had died. I never knew this story. There was so much about the Deacons that we knew what they was doing, but would not say, would not allow. Was always told not to say, to don't expose these men to get their names out because of fear of what may happen to them in their family life.
They had the movie with Forrest Whitaker and Oscar Davis and Silverman.
Yeah.
Jonathan Silverman. They on the they talked about the Deacons and asking why was it that when they were in the process of doing the movie that they tried to get information about the Deacons, and why was it they couldn't get any information, and why was it that the people in Bogalusa act as if they were ashamed of what they had done. And we just smiled when we saw that. At that time, I really wanted to write them and tell them what it was, what the situation was, but my father was still living then. And so I said, now that my father's not here, and I'm not going to give all the names, but I can tell you, we could not give information out because the FBI, when we gave information out, the FBI, who we had many times seen associating with the police officers, and the police officers were the one to attack us with the other whites. And so when you put that together, then you don't really want to share information because it endangers the Deacons' lives. So no, we would not tell. You don't discuss what happens with the Deacons. You don't discuss the sickness that they have. It's just those things you just don't discuss. And of course we're proud. Everybody, so many people that's living now is because of the protection from the Deacons. And my dad always said, what kind of man, Martin Luther King was a good man. He had a dream, but my dad had fought for the dream. And it was his right to fight for the dream. You have a constitutional right, and that's what Daddy said. I have a right to bear arms. And if I need to protect my family, especially when the police did not protect us, then he had a right to do that. The Deacons had a right to carry the gun. Governor McKiffin came on television and said, I know that they have a right to carry those guns. I know that. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to take every gun away from them that I can to disarm them. And it would take a period of time before they can get their guns back. And that was his plan. And if we have to go to court, we have to go to court. But at least I'll get the guns out of the black men in Bogalusa. But no, the Deacons had the guns for protection. And that was it. When the deputy sheriff O'Neill Moore and Creed Rogers were killed in the Angie Vonnedo area, now understand that we didn't have any black police officers or sheriffs at all, and that was one of the things that they asked for. Daddy, and I say Daddy, I mean Daddy, the Bogalusa Voters League. That's one of the things that the lawyers wrote up and presented to the mayor, presented to the governor. We wanted to have black police officers, and we got them. Now, what people don't know is the Deacons, for a long period of time, because we know it was a setup, they protected the police, the deputy sheriff. Everything was going on fine. Everything was okay. And then it happened. And my daddy really felt bad about that. But that was going to happen. That was the setup anyway. It was going to happen. When they called the wife, Maybella, and told her to get out of the house, that they were going to kill the family, it was the deacons, all of the deacons, that went up there to protect the Moore family and brought them back into the home. Maybella Moore tells the story all the time. So they saved that life. You see articles all the time in the paper where people respond about the deacons that came through Bogalusa, how the deacons saved their lives. So no, it's just not just a group of black men with going, just carrying guns and shooting or whatever. No, we were not the Klans in attitudes. We had men to protect the families, and that's exactly what happened. So that was that was the deacons that we saw and that we felt safe about.
Tell them about the man, the debt that cannot be repaid.
Oftentimes when the civil rights workers came in and we were going back and forth to court, the deacons would go back and forth with them to court. And
down in New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
In a federal court down in New Orleans. And they just would know. They would find out. They had so many leaks or so. They would find out what new. I guess they look at the license plates or so, and they discover, this is somebody new coming in, and so the Klans would be behind them, right behind them, and so we had deacons who knew the route, just as Rob did. Different ways to go and to try to protect the people coming in. You had to bring them in. You had to meet them. You had to bring them in. That's why they got the crossing of the book, the crossing Border Street. You have to protect the men that's coming in, and the civil rights workers going out. That was a constant thing that we had to do. When Malcolm X was assassinated, and that was a day after my father's birthday. My father was born February the 20th. I think Malcolm X was assassinated on the 21st. The Deacons for Defense, the chapter in Bogalusa, was born. And we felt safe after that.
One of the things that the Bogalusa Voters League and that organization did was to have the black, white signs removed at the federal building, black, white, at the courthouse where my husband worked, Crown Zellerback, black, white, service stations everywhere. And we put on drives to get black people registered to vote. I remember one old lady, I think she was related to Ricky Hill too. She went to the courthouse and she was very old, like 90 years old or something. And they have an elevator there. And they wouldn't let her use the elevator to go upstairs to register. And she said, "Don't worry about it, baby. I'll crawl up." She crawled up the stairs. So that's the kind of strongness that was developed here in Bogalusa. We stopped shopping here at Bogalusa. So many stores from the main street gone. We stopped shopping and we go other places to shop. And every time they'd have a big affairs where they were, the whites were up in there having a big party at one of the fabulous restaurants they had. We get a group of people and go test it. And those people would leave. So we got that fabulous restaurants closed. So anything that the league could do to betterment the blacks, we did it. We just worked on it. We did it. We marched every day. Every day we marched. We burned up a lot of police cars, but we marched every day.
You know,
Can I just ask one thing? How are folks doing? Does anybody feel like they need a break or
I'm okay.
doing okay?
We're used to this. So many times when the family would just get together, I don't know why we never would go on and what? Tape it.
Yeah.
We just talk about it and just talk about it. I remember every time we would get with Gail and we were marching and they wouldn't let a group of people join the march. And one of the policemen pulled a gun on a lady, told her she couldn't join that march or he'd shoot her. And she told him, and your mama miss you from supper tonight. So they can't remember that. She said, your mama miss you from supper tonight. But, you know, once they were determined to do things, they did it. They did it. And the children caught it in school. They had to fight. They had to fight in school. That was all the time. We just kept going down there. And I went in with... The judge called us in one day, and the judge and Dick brought us in, and the judge was talking to us, and he was telling them that he was going to protect our children and let them keep going to school, and how he was going to protect them. And I said, wait a minute, Judge, I want to tell you something. I said, I've heard about how you was going to protect them, but our children go to school and they're attacked every day. I said, every time my telephone rings, my heart is in my mouth because my children are over there. And you have not protected them. You told us you was going to protect them, but you haven't protected them. They're still getting beat up over there. He said, let me tell you something, Miss Hicks. I told you I was going to protect them. And I'm going to protect them. He put a fine on them that if one child got attacked over there, how much the school was going to have to pay. And we walked out the chamber, and Dix overlooked at me and he said, Jackie, do you know you're not supposed to talk to the judge? He said, I'm the lawyer. You're not supposed to talk to the judge. He said, but I want you to know you did a hell of a job up in there. I said, those are my children, Dick. That's not the judge's children. And it was such a small amount of them. They didn't have a chance over there. And he was the one who told us to send those children over there. And I felt like he had a right to do something about it.
you were talking about the Deacons and what the influence that it had. And I think one of the things that the Deacons did, when you look at them, and of course they didn't start in Bogalusa, they started in Jonesboro. And we were one of the first chapters after that. But one of the things that the Deacons did, the role that they played, was certainly to protect the community and families. And I think for us as a family, being a Mark family, we got super protection. We never went any place 24/7 without being escorted by the Deacons. So our whole world changed and we were all protected. And I think when you look at the Deacons, I often say there were two kinds of Deacons. There was a group with Fletcher and Charles Sims and that whole group. But out of that came another group of Deacons, which were what I call the unofficial Deacons. And that was a group of black men who did not guard our house, but were in a neighborhood and they guarded their neighborhood. The man came home from work and that there were 3 black men on that street. Then one night, Mr. Smith guarded the street. If somebody came down there, a car they didn't recognize, he was there. And they spent nights laying in the front of their house on the floor guarding. The next night, Mr. Broomfield guarded the street. And so one of the interesting things that the Deacons did, one of the roles that they played, they created a self-empowerment, self-protection, not only as an organization, But as pride in the community, the black men began to say, I'm going to take this step. I'm going to do what the deacons are doing, and the deacons had a role because there were people who were in the movement, there were leaders, and they needed to be protected. And those leaders were the leaders of the Bogalusa Voters League. And the role that they were playing was to fight the fight, to lead the marches, to file the suits, and do all that. But we needed the deacons, to protect the leaders and the families, the marked families. But then it became a second group that in the community. And that group became an unofficial group of deacons, and that was all over Bogalusa in terms of blacks organizing among themselves from Poplar Quarters to Bogalusa to wherever. You had that kind of thing that happened because the deacons got organized. And that began to... I'm sorry, go ahead.
You may want to let Mama talk about Bloody Wednesday in Bogalusa.
On 4th Street?
Yeah.
You could do that?
Yeah. AZ was in the hospital. Something had happened, they had arrested Bob. Poor Bob just stayed in jail so much, but he'd come out and he'd fight right on. A group of people decided they were going to march at night. And they started to march, and the policemen surrounded, they had no leader there. They surrounded them, they started beating the people, they called it Bloody Wednesday. They beat every black person they could. They had buses, they loaded them up on buses. And people coming from work didn't even know what was happening. They just beat them and throw them in the bus too. People that were in the restaurants, they went and pulled them out and took them to jail. And they just had a whole group of black people, men and women, down there in jail. And this is what they call it, the Bloody Wednesday, because they beat those people up. Their leaders were not with them. They didn't have anyone to really protect them.
But you were down there.
Yeah, but it wasn't that much I could do.
She's trying to get you to tell about when you and Gail were in the car. They tried to get you to come out.
Oh yeah, the policeman, when the policeman came to the car, Mary was there.
Mary Williams, I'm sorry.
And they came to the car and they snatched on the door and said, "Come on out of here." And I just picked my gun up off my lap and pointed to him, told him I wasn't moving. I was not moving. So Mary and I stayed in the car. Then we locked the door, and Bertrand Wire came and got us. Bertrand and Reese Perkins came down and got us and carried us home. But we must have been the only people that didn't get put in jail down there, because I took my pistol and pointed right at him. I said, "I'm not getting out of this car." I was not getting out of that car.
And it was sort of like a reaction that a lot of these people who decided to march had not necessarily been involved in the march as such. And 4th Street was like the center of entertainment for Black Bogalusa. There must have been 24 different bars and places there, little restaurants and things. But that was pool halls. That was Black life. But a lot of the people who were down there on that Wednesday, when they heard that Daddy had gotten arrested and a couple of other people had gotten arrested, as my daddy says in the film, he said, when Bogalusa folks black folks make up their mind to do something, you can't stop them. He said that all the time. And so they decided they were going to march because Daddy had been arrested and Gail and people in the Voters League. So they decided this is going to be the People's March. And so Mama and them went down and said, "Wait, y'all can't do it that way. You don't have a permit, you don't have this." And see, we were on a court order. It was twofold. Whenever we did anything, we were to notify the police department, and it was like that. But they decided they were going to do it anyway. And so they started this march. And then they called in all those police because they were marching illegal, and they beat everybody they could, locked them up. And if you happened to be getting out for work at 4 o'clock, walking down the street, they beat you and threw you in. The result of that, however, was that all those people who had not been involved in the march got involved in the march. I know you got a drink of
Yeah,
water.
let's take a break.
Yeah, we're rolling again.
Okay, we just are back from a little break. I wanted to ask you all for your perspective about the following. There's a kind of a culmination in July of '65 when after all that tension through the spring and it gets to July, and I think A.Z. Young says, we're on the verge of civil war here. Tensions have kind of peaked, and the federal government intervenes in a certain kind of way. John Doerr comes from the Justice Department, and some suits are filed.
The mom want
And-
to talk about John Doe.
And so people think about that moment. Some people look at that moment and they say one thing. Some people look at that moment and they say another. And I'm wondering about your perspective about the transition across kind of that moment in the summer of '65 and going on from there. Because Bloody Wednesday's after that, for example. And lots of other things keep happening. And, there's a lot of... But I'm wondering about how you feel about change. What changed, what didn't change.
Did I tell you something about John Doe? John Doe, we were at a meeting at A.Z. Young's house. And John Doe's group of men that he had in here had done nothing but what you doing on the table. Looking at things, writing it down. They stood up there and watched those barbers connect their hose to a hot water tank and put it on those young white civil rights workers that was picketing. And all they did was they wrote it down. And a lot of things they saw, they wrote it down. So then John Doe came in, he had this big meeting with us, and he was so proud of what his men had done. And I was tired. We had been working, I was tired. And then I just kind of sit up. And I told him, you and your men are not doing anything. We don't need you to write notes. We can write notes. If you're going to write notes and do nothing with it, we don't need... We had problems with some of the FBI agents, too. Maybe they're better. But it's some of them I don't care too much about because they didn't help out either. And a lot of time they get that information, they sit on it. They have enough information to do things with and they don't do it. And John Doe was one of those people, and then I just told him how I felt about him, and A.Z. was very upset with me because John Doe was the big man. But he hadn't done anything, and it wasn't any reason to sugarcoat him.
Well, I guess the way I kind of look at part of that is I don't see after '65 where justice was served. I don't see where they arrested anybody. I don't see where they put anybody in jail. I don't see where they put restrictions
They put blacks?
in terms of progress in this whole struggle. And that when you begin to look at '65 to 2005, you still say that there are educational problems in the African American community. There's still high unemployment in the black community. There's still problems getting jobs. There's still many of the problems that we had in the early '60s are still here in different kinds of ways. We have certainly a high prison population that is continuing. We have drugs in the African American community, and African Americans don't have the resources to bring drugs into their communities in the way that they're being brought. Certainly that this has to do with a bigger picture. And there's this whole issue about the war on poverty and the war on drugs and how that was out, and even the war in Vietnam and the change to the contraband and the drugs and all those issues. So you begin to wonder, though there has been progress in terms of public accommodations, and the issue really in the when the movement began for many people in the movement was not about public accommodation. It was about jobs and economic fairness. And I think it became an issue that won the press and part of some of the major civil rights organizations that came out of a Quaker movement, philosophy of nonviolence and all of that, and felt that part of this also be public accommodations, getting people to accept you, and perhaps with the idea that if you accepted us, if we could eat with you, you would accept us, but eating in restaurants didn't get us any jobs, you know. And so those become crucial issues. Whether or not we're better off now that we've integrated schools is certainly up for debate. And the mechanism of selective segregation, de facto segregation, all these problems exist today. And certainly one of the things and I think when you start to look at the civil rights movement in small towns, as opposed to places like Atlanta, New Orleans, Birmingham, when those movements happened, Baton Rouge or wherever, you had a massive support system. First, we had more people. You had young people from colleges that participated in that fight. But in small towns throughout the South, the movement was different. The whole fight was different because number one, you didn't have the people, you didn't have the resources, and you didn't have always the support. And so it was a whole different kind of fight. And still today, those problems, to a degree, still exist in small towns. That the advantages that you have in a public school in New Orleans and the resources are different from the schools in Bogalusa. You know, so when we begin to look at what progress has been made, certainly we've made progress in terms of public accommodation and certain other minor places, and certainly we have the right to vote, and we vote in larger numbers. But when you get down to the bread and butter of it, you know, we have not made as much progress as people would like to lead us to believe that we have. And so my take is that we have a long ways to go, and that we made some enormous sacrifices, and it has not paid off. As King once said, there is still a check that is yet to be cashed.
It's hard to answer that one.
Anybody else want to talk a little bit about?
What Charles didn't tell you, he was at school, Southern University, state school, and he got out of school, he and one of his little friends, and came over to march in a march with us. They expelled them from school. And Bob made a tape that someone come over and taped. It's not in the best condition now. But anyway, Bob had a beef with John McKithen anyway because he had put his son out of school because he marched in a march. So the people that were in the higher places that could have helped us out, they didn't. And then the few white people who did try to stand up to help us out, they retaliated against them. So they just did like most black people do. They kept their mouths shut and sit down and didn't do anything.
Charles, did you want to talk about that?
Well, yeah, and I don't know if that is really, you know, in terms of your question, but as an experience, and I think one of the things about this family is that each one of us, and it'd be interesting, and I think you have some notes about different experiences that each one of us had. And of course, one of my experiences was that I was expelled from Southern University. And one evening, the Dean of Men called me and some friends at Southern in and said, I need to talk to you all. We have some Peace Corps volunteers on campus, and you all have been interacting with them, and we're concerned. This is the first time we've had Peace Corps volunteers on campus, and we don't want, and they were white basically, and we don't want any problems, and we have a concern that we don't want to have any problems. And so we explained to the dean that we were, we just had formed a friendship. We would all eat dinner together and sit out on the quad and or someplace and talk and share experiences and stuff, and they were from all over the country. And he said, well, we're very concerned about this. And it was supposed to have been 6 of us in that meeting, about 6 o'clock in the evening. So then he said, the Dean of Men said, okay, well, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. And then as we got ready to leave, he said, Mr. Hicks, I need you to stay. And so I was active in student government, so I thought he wanted to talk to me about something with student government. He said, Mr. Hicks, we've identified you as the main source of concern here, and that we've decided that we need to expel you. And I thought, I knew Dean Jones well, so I said, sure, Dean Jones, right, expel me. And he said, I'm serious, Mr. Hicks. I said, sure, serious, and I'm Chuck Hicks. And he said, I'm not playing. He said, I want you to pack your stuff and get off this campus immediately. And I think that perhaps was the most devastating thing that had ever happened to me. I'm sure it was at that time. Number one was that I was the first generation in my family to go to college. I remember when they would come to high schools and you had to take the test for the Army. And I remember we were in the dining room and the recruiting officer told me, I said, I don't need to take that because I'm going to college. And so with this concept of mine of going to college and being in college and finishing for college that was what I was supposed to do. That's what I planned. I knew since I was in 9th grade that I was going to college. And so all of a sudden to be told, hey, you're out. And I want you out not tomorrow, but now. And there was no hearing, no judicial process. We had a student court to hound things, nothing. I just had to get off that campus. It reminded me when I think back to when the students marched on Southern University, from Southern University marched on the Capitol. And after they did that, the president called them in and he said, I want you to take every piece of paper, every pencil, every pen. I want everybody to be off this campus in 24 hours. And anything that you leave on this campus will be destroyed. And we will readmit you one by one. I mean, that was the same kind of thing, only it was an individual case. And I remember that I called home and I said, I'm being kicked out of school and I didn't do anything. And I oftentimes reflect back on it and I said, I think that if suicide had entered my life, I probably would have taken seriously of committing it. Southern is located on the banks of the Mississippi, and there's a picture of me in the yearbook where I walked out on one of those long things that walked into. I probably, reflecting back, that would have been. I just felt that I was being put in a position where I was the beginning of hope. I was the new generation. I was the new beginning for my family. I was the first one to go to college, and here I was, that being taken, and that was absolutely devastating.
When?
63, 4, about 65, I think it was. 66. 66.
You graduated in 63.
Yeah, I graduated in 63, and I was a junior, I think, or sophomore, something around that time.
64.
But one of the things that I didn't know was that because of the conflict happening between the Bogalusa Voters League, vis-a-vis my dad and the governor, they had a meeting with the governor, and the governor had wanted a cooling off period. and they refused to have a cooling off period because the governor had not met the demands of the Bogalusa Voters League. So when they flew them back from Baton Rouge, he had a press conference and announced that the Bogalusa Voters League had agreed to a press conference. And my dad said when they got back, it was AZ, Gail, Jenkins, I think RT.
It was just AZ and Bob.
And Daddy. Okay. He said that there were 250 black people in the Union Hall mad as hell at them. And it took them an hour to convince them people that they had not sold them out. And, saying, what is this? We've been beat, we've been spit on, we've been all this, and y'all go off and we ain't got nothing. And he kept saying, so they called a press conference. And in return said the governor is mistaken, the boycott will continue. And at that point, the governor was against the wall. And of course, he began a personal attack on the Hicks family. And I became a victim. Now, my sister Barbara was at Dillard. And they tried. No, this is that they tried to find a way to expel her. But she was at a private school. And Southern was a state school. And because the state, Southern University, was under auspices of the governor, he ordered that I be expelled. And so that was just the most devastating thing that I went through in terms of a personal experience
The one
in the
thing,
movie.
the one thing when Charles called and told us that he had been expelled, and he was in tears, and I said, Charles, don't worry about it. You got a mom and a dad who loves you, and you will go to school. You don't have to go there. And he said, but I didn't do anything. We knew he hadn't done anything. We knew exactly what happened. McKithen was getting at Bob because Bob and AZ would not call that boycott off. And the people he and Bogalusa was down his back. So that's what happened there.
When I just want to go back a little bit. When the civil rights movement started and the core workers and all the students from California, Berkeley, all over came in, and the first one stayed at our house, and then thereafter we had a lot of civil rights workers to stay at our house. Then it expanded through the community, and but that changed. One of the things that happened, and with all the threats from the Klans, one of the things that happened is that we could no longer sleep in our beds. Because you had, my room was given to my sister, my room was given to the civil rights workers there. In the front part of the house, the living room and the dining room area, was the Deacons and all of their guns. And in the boys' room, I really don't know how we did that. That's where we were, in that area. So we changed from never sleeping in pajamas anymore, taking baths early because all the lights had to be out at a certain time, so so they didn't have lights so they can see what was going on in the home. We all knew and we were aware of the Deacons on the top of the roof, just all over. Deacons were all over. And when we walked, we had to be careful because you had to walk past Deacons and you had to walk past guns. So that went on, it seemed like a long time. When I left and went out to college, there were many problems. Of course, you're in college, you're trying to concentrate, you hear the news, you get a telephone call, everything that's happening in Bogalusa, and you just could not put yourself into what you were there for. It was very hard. In addition to that, you were trying to do your own thing. The things that were happening there, you tried to get people involved with the movement. You would go out for voters registration, the help of the different organizations. Rap Brown came in, he spoke. Well, not Rap Brown anymore, but he spoke. Just a lot of things that was constantly going on, and it went on and went on until I think either the graduation itself or right before the church sermon, whatever it was. There was an incident in Bogalusa. My mom couldn't come. She couldn't come to, was it the graduation or the whatever was going on, the baccalaureate, the Sunday thing or whatever. Something had happened. Somebody had fired in the house. Somebody had done something to someone, so they couldn't make it. So all that was affecting you. So once I served as the first black director of nursing for the City of New Orleans Department of Health. And they had someone to come to the office, and he wanted to do a book, and he wanted to interview me. And it was as if I had never been in the civil rights movement. I had successfully taken everything and took it out of my mind completely. And he was asking me about people, just major things that happened. I said, I just don't remember. I just don't remember. So he finally closed his little paper, and then he left us. So, but over the years, because my father talked civil rights and human rights all the time, and so a little bit with support, it just started coming back and coming back. But that's the kind of psychological effect that it had. It was so bad, and you worried so much about dad and mama being hurt or killed or whatever until you tried to put it out of your mind. And that's not good. That wasn't good. My baby sister, who's dead now, she wrote a book, Hidden Shadows, and I'm going to share that with you. She explains how her whole life, and I think she was like 13, she explains how her whole life, how she missed when civil rights started in our town, how her mom and dad were taken away from her. And so she missed all of her mom and dad per se. She didn't have them there because when you walked in the house, somebody was there all bloody. You had someone like taking a deposition or so on the floor, writing, getting the story. You had mom and dad always involved in something. There was no more life. We didn't have the friends that we had before because they were afraid, and so the association was different. We had problems in school because many of the teachers did not participate in the movement, and they would talk about mom and dad, why they started all this mess, and so that would go on, and we got all of this. So you try to deal with it in a way that you could go on with your life, but as I was telling someone not too long ago, the civil rights movement and the experience that I went through with Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, those experiences will always affect you some kind of way. And by learning from my mom and dad, it's hard not to see prejudice or a biased situation. Went through a situation with my mom and just last week, and I said, I don't want to go over the whole situation. But I said to Mama, Mama, you know what Daddy would have said? If it sounds like racism, if you look and you see that it's racism, and you hear racism, he said, it is racism. And that's what I saw 4 days ago. Discrimination on age, gender, and race. 82-year-old black female just was discriminated against. And so I thank my father, because my father has given something. Even though we went through everything we went through, I learned so much from him, and he's given us so much until we cannot rest until injustice is really, until we have justice for everybody, until freedom is here, until you have respect for 82-year-old black female here in Bogalusa. It's right there for you, and you have to stand up, and you have to do what you have to do. And as we like to say as Hicks, you know, the Bob Hicks came out of us. And so you stand up and you do what you have to do. So the effect on the entire family, I don't know how my other siblings feel, but it's the civil rights movement and the injustice that we went through as a family will remain with us forever. Forever.
Pause for, yeah, we are.
Okay. Yeah, I wonder if folks want to evaluate the things that were better and the things that were harder.
I listened to some of the things Barbara was saying, and kind of surprised at some of the things she said, because I got some similar beliefs in some of the things she said. I was young. I had a happy childhood. Probably up until the time the civil rights movement started, we was totally involved as a family. We did everything. We believed that the things we doing was the good and the right thing to do. But I think the effect that it had on me from seeing Governor McKipton in the house and the way he would try to manipulate the black leaders and seeing all the things in my young life, it gave me a nasty taste for politics and anything. I have never been, since I left home, been involved in anything that to do with politics. It do not sit nice with me. I don't do it. One of the things I always remember what my little sister said, she believed that if people in this country would leave the kids alone, they would straighten it out. You know, you stop. You teach them values. You teach them good. You teach them the things that are good. But you let young kids come together and be themselves, and that will get rid of all your prejudiceness and racial stuff. Just let the kids alone. And I believe that, because like I say, I don't want anything to do with politics. My brother and sister could tell you the things they do. They try to involve me too. I'd rather go and do work. I think Charles made that statement before. And, that's what I do well. But I don't think so. I think I do a lot of things well. I just don't have a taste for it. It destroyed that taste in that. Now, I still have a sense of what's fair and what's right. And I think what it also did to me, my later version idea about racism, is just American greed. I think that drives prejudice and racism more than anything else in this country. Is greed. If you got on a nice suit, you want a better suit tomorrow. If you're driving a nice car, you want a better car tomorrow. It's greed. You can look at things, at least from my perspective, when I look at things in this country, it's greed that's pushing this country down. And with greed you come with family pride, because if if I'm a advocate of greed, then my greed just don't extend for myself but my family too. And that's where, in my belief, that a lot of the prejudice come in, because I'm not going to let anybody interfere or disrupt that. But I think that's my perspective on the civil rights movement. What it did to me as a kid that had a happy, very happy childhood, went to all white school, jumped on practically every day, if not me, one of my fellow classmates, and I'm tired of it. I don't have a taste for it. That's what I think it did to me. I think it changed my way that I grew up as a child to the way that I see things as an older person, as a man. I don't like the way the greed and the prejudice of this country it goes. I don't like it.
You want to say something?
Well, I worked in the plant behind my father. They made him a supervisor, and I came to work in the plant. What happened to me? They couldn't do anything to him because how he was tired. So all the problems fell on me. They did me things. Understand? All the pressure of what they couldn't do to him fell right on me. I was harassed and mistreated because of him, But and a lot of times I wasn't in a situation to do nothing about it because there was so many against me, So but I dealt with it, Just another experience. And experience don't do them but make you stronger in some other ways. Give you more understanding about different things.
But don't kill you, make you stronger, right?
Yeah, that's one thing Bob always said, that anything we experience, if it don't kill you, it will make you stronger. And I think about things that I accomplished in life, and I think about the path I took. And when I kind of got off the path, he would kind of encourage me, okay, remember this is what you are working for, and this is your goal. And he was like a supporter. And I think by being in the civil rights movement and seeing somewhat of the progress that he did make, some of the changes that our marches made me stronger. So when I got on the job and I had different activities or different things that happened to me, and I knew it was prejudice that caused the people to treat me the way they did, I was able to survive. I was able to think about, okay, now if I do A, then B is going to happen, because Bob has always taught us you have to have a plan. You can't just go in there and just do what you feel. You have to do things that would help the situation and not hurt it. So it made me stop and think, because at one point in my life, I remember I was very hot-headed, and he was saying, you need to do this and you need to do that. And, up until the time he passed, he was still giving me advice, And it was like, I think because of the civil rights movement, like I said, it just made me stronger. It made me to think logically about things on the job. When I give advice to my children and grandchildren, it's things that he has taught me, and other people in my life. And Jack and Bob has always been like, the best advisors. They never judged us. They always advised us, and that's what I try to do for my children too.
And the thing about the thing about Rob having the same, name after his dad, and going through that experience at Crown Zellerback, that was always a problem. It was always a problem, because they would take what your parents were doing, and then they'll inflict that on the children. and it was just something that we had to deal with, and it was very, very hard. But what I wanted to say was, after Daddy's death, we've had many white people and many black people to come and call and say how fair Daddy was at that meal. Not only to the blacks, but to the white, that he was the best supervisor, that he just was a fair man. And one of the sons of a person at the meal in a supervisor position that he had a lot of problems with, his son recalls when Daddy came to his house and he gave him they served him a Coca-Cola, and Daddy reached in his pocket and gave the little boy a quarter, a dime, or whatever it was. And he said he didn't know why, but he was so happy that Mr. Hicks had given him that quarter dime. But he said, that's why I always remembered him. And he wanted to call us and tell us that his dad never said anything bad about my daddy, well, when he wasn't there. And I thought that was whatever. But they always talk about the fairness. And then it was what he did. It benefited black and whites in Bogalusa and just everywhere. Wherever Daddy saw injustice, he would address it. Anywhere. The hospitals, where we could only go to hospitals on certain days, he filed a suit. Housing, there was a problem with housing where they want to put it in only the black neighborhood and wouldn't get any information, advice as to committee or whatever. He stopped the housing. He
Public
made it
housing.
public housing. The education, not the education, the fair employment for men and women. Now, Mama likes to talk about that. Daddy was always concerned that if a woman does the same job that a man is doing, then you pay him the same. And he always wanted to fight for that. He also had a passion, and you can clearly see with what's happening with the mass incarceration of African Americans in this country. He would say, look at those black boys. Just look at all these black boys that they have put in prison, and some of them for reasons that they should not have been in prison, but that's the way it was. They were accused. Some deserved to be there, but the majority, the whole idea was, look what the society is doing. And I heard him, but I really didn't know that he had gotten to a point that he had sort of moved, and I think you might hear a little less about what King did in one of his last speeches, where he began to move from the civil rights to the human right. And I didn't understand exactly where he was going until I heard Michelle Alexander talking about the new Jim Crow with the mass incarceration. And it was like, my daddy was so smart. He was already beginning to get there, to let us see what you are doing to the black men and boys in America. And then once again, shame on you, America. Shame on you for what you're doing to those black boys and people of color. And I can't even discuss it. When you go down to the prison and you see the percentage, the large numbers of black men that they have working, strong, good looking black men. That's a problem. There's a problem. And the only thing I can say, I know we're limited here, but the only thing I can say is for America to look at the mass incarceration of African American men and people of color and do something about it. And that's it.
Daryl, I think, was trying to say something.
Okay, Daryl, you want to tell how it affected you?
Oh, I forgot.
Greg and Rob had the opportunity to work at the mill through Paul. And during the summer when they would come home. But I don't know if y'all remember, one summer I came home from Southern and I said, I want to work at the mill this summer. So I went, put in my application. They never called. So I said, Paul, they ain't never called me. Everybody done worked 2 weeks. It's 2 weeks into the summer. So he said, let me check on it. So he called Brenjay and whoever was out there at the time at the mill and human resources. And he said, yeah, we got the application, but we've done all the hiring. He said, we all need to do one more hire. So no, we met our quota of summer workers that we're going to hire. So Paul thought about it. He thought about it. And he said one day and he called, I can't think of it was Robert something, the lawyer at the time.
Collins, maybe.
Robert,
Bob Collins?
it was a local lawyer. A local lawyer. And he said, you know what? I got an EEOC case I want you to look into. And he came to that house that night. We sit in the den on Robert Bobby Street. And he talked to me. And he said, he talked to Paul. He said, are you sure you want to go forward with this? Are you ready for us to file on this EEOC that they won't hire you because of who you are? I said, yeah, I'm ready. Let's go forward. So we, signed the papers and everything. The next week, evidently, it got back to them what we were doing. They called me in for an interview. I went in for the interview, did well on the interview. Everything was okay. But they found one loophole not to hire me. When they sent me for a physical, they sent me through a full physical. And they found a hernia, an inguinal hernia. And that's why the doctor said they couldn't hire me because I had to get the hernia fixed. So I had to end up going back to Rosenblum's that summer and working at the store. And that was really a downer because, like I said, Greg had did the hog log, and I wanted to get out there and do the hog log because if Greg could do it, I figured I could work the hog log or work, a double shift, 2 double shifts or whatever, and do it. Because I just, that was just a tradition, for everybody to work on the fall in the mill or that. And when I didn't get it, and I had to go back to, I had a job waiting for me doing something, but I had to go back to that showed me then how much or how far injustice goes to with people.
And see, that's the point.
It trickles down.
Daddy never missed that. He never would miss that. When he would kind of bow his head a little bit, and he'd take his thumbs like this, and he was up to something. He was thinking about something. And I'm sure that's exactly what he did with Darryl. Okay, let's try this. Because he always wanted to file a suit, go to court, and get injustice. And I want to say one thing. When we did our testing of public facilities, and when we went into Woolworth, they removed all of the seats and the counters, and they closed it down so they didn't have to serve black. And my daddy sits up here, and he said, that's one thing that I didn't do. I should have filed a suit on Woolworth across this country. That if they were going to pull it down in Bogalusa, then they were going to pull it down in every Woolworth they had across this country and deal with it. Because that was, they showed us that we were not going to be served at Woolworth. And he said, I didn't have the lawyers to do that for me. And that's the only thing I regret.
Daryl, what year was that experience at the summer at the plant?
I was 77.
Yeah.
77.
Yeah.
You know,
And that's like a 10-year.
That's right. That's 10 years.
10 years clean.
Yeah, and 2 generations.
Mm-hmm.
Let me invite you to offer final thoughts, and you've been extremely patient and very generous, so thank you all for that. If there's more you feel you would like to say, we'd love to hear it. So.
well,
I'm through. I'm through.
well, you know, I asked my daddy once, I said, Dad, do you think that we are an extraordinary family? And he said, no, son, I think we're an ordinary family that God prepared for extraordinary times. And when I think about my dad and some of the things that he did in terms of how the civil rights movement changed our family and did all that, one of the things that my mom and dad were noted for long before they got into the movement was that their ability to care for the community. There are many kids who are now grown and stuff who can tell you about what daddy and mama did for them. My father and mother were taking kids in the neighborhood to college, to Southern, and sometimes to Grambling, when none of us were going. But because they needed to go to college and they didn't have cars, my mother and daddy would pack their cars and sometimes take 2 or 3 trips to get kids in Bogalusa to Southern. They had a fair. It was segregated at that time, but because we had a car, my dad would sometimes make 5 and 6 trips to Franklinton Fair, so that
It's 20 miles, isn't it?
yeah, so that
21.
so the black kids in our neighborhood or wherever in the city who wanted to go to the fair could go. And they paid 50 cents or $1 to go, but if they didn't have the money, he said, come on, I'll take you anyway. And so they have always been people who cared in the community. And as a family, we grew up where family was important. And we literally never did anything that didn't happen with the family. You know, we never stayed overnight at anybody's house. When my parents went to New Orleans to buy a car, the first time they bought a car, we were staying at my grandmother's. And they came back, I guess, 10 or we were in bed. They came, woke us up, and took us home. We never stayed at other people's houses. The kids could stay with us, but we stayed. When we did something during the summer, we went crabbing as a family. We went fishing as a family. We did so much as a family. And the one standard rule that we had that was just that could not be broken was that you were family and brothers and sisters don't fight. And regardless of whatever happened, if I spit in my brother's face, we both got whipped because we were brothers, and the first thing we did was fought. Not because of, well, Rob said this, I did this. The first principle was that you're family and brothers and sisters don't fight. And that has been a principle that has carried through this family that has gone on for generations and generations. And one of the interesting things that have happened about that is I've watched my brothers and sisters with their children and my nieces and nephews. If they get into a fight, an argument, or disagreement, and if one of them says, if my nephew Greg's son says, well, Rob's son started it, you know what they tell him? You see all these adults around here? Then why didn't you come to somebody? You both were punished. And so the value of family has been just absolutely very, very important for us as a family. And during the civil rights movement, when our lives changed, as Barbara alluded to, when we were growing up, every night we sat down and had dinner together. And we had to talk about what happened to us at school. On Sundays we had family prayer together. We did all these things, and then all of a sudden the civil rights movement comes in, and we're no longer acting as a family. While we were still there and doing family things, as much as we could. But one of the things that the reason we were in the movement is not maybe because we wanted to, but because our parents were in it, we were automatically in it. Because whatever they did, we did, and whatever they did, they included us. So when they got in the movement, we knew we were in it. There wasn't a question of do you want to be in the movement. We just automatically knew. I asked my dad, I said, Daddy, did you ever talk to Greg and Pina about integrating the school? He said, no, I just signed them up. And I asked him, I said, did Daddy? He said, no. I said, did you want to do it? He said, it wasn't a question of wanting. We were the Hickses, we were in the movement, and we did it. And I think the miraculous things about all of this is that after the movement, after all that we've cut, all that we've been through, the many stress, the many sleepless nights, the fear, the psychological effect, the doing without, the attacks, is that we came back together, that we were allowed to come back together and be a family again. And that we came out of this, as so many other black families in small towns and cities, we came out of this same, that we still have our minds. And when you think about sometimes the things that black people have gone through since they've been in this country, and if you were to concentrate on it long enough, you would probably just go insane. But we've been blessed as a family to come back out of all of this same, healthy, and still a family.
Well, thank you all so much. It's been a long evening. Especially thank you for your patience and your generosity. Thank you all. It was a real honor to be with you. Thank you.
Oh, we thank you. Thank you.
This video raises questions, and I need for you to be extremely honest in the comments when answering them. And just so you know, I have 2 questions. Number 1, are you afraid of change? And number 2, what lessons did you learn from your father? Please be honest in the comments when answering these questions. Share this video with anyone you deem necessary, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.